Okay, it is recording. So without wasting any time, let's go on to sharing my screen for a while. Is it coming? Okay. Alright, so let me know if you can't follow along. Just two things for today. Okay, we are still in the same track. We are still talking about where are the situations that we will come across vectors in daily life. Not really daily life is too much of exaggeration, but as an engineer, let's say, okay, so in your career or whatever field, where are the things that you will come across vectors? So previously, we learned on gradient vectors, and we see that we also come across vectors when we are dealing with directional derivatives. So two things. Today, another two scenario where you will encounter vectors. So curl and divergence. Okay, so before we go into curl and divergence, I want you guys to get used to this operator right here. It's called the del operator. I'm not sure whether some other textbook use some other names, but we call it usually the del operator. The del operator is an operator. It doesn't have any value by itself. For example, plus is an operator. Minus is an operator. There's no value for it, but it is an operator between two or more numbers. Okay, so that is the meaning of an operator. So this is an operator in the form of a vector. So we will be using this operator here to find out what is the curl of a function, what is the divergence of a function. But that's the point. This is an operator, okay? So either I write it in the form of I, J, K, or as we know, there's another alternative way to write vectors. I can also write it as delta is equal to a vector where the first element is dou over dou x. We don't say d. See, this is a curly d. So in mathematics, the name of the symbol is dou. So dou over dou x, dou over dou y, or dou over dou z. Okay. The dou here, it means partial derivative. Do you still remember partial derivative, the one that we did in our previous class? It means that if in a function, you have x, y, and z, but if I currently differentiate with respect to only x, meaning that all my other things are constant, if I do that, then another way of writing it is dou over dou x. So meaning that if I am differentiating a multivariable function with respect to only variable x, I can either write it as f with a small x here, or it also means the same thing if I write it as dou f over dou x. It means the same thing. I am currently doing a partial differentiation where I am only differentiating with respect to x. So that is all the meaning of the dou here. Dou by itself, no meaning. But if I put a f here, now you have a meaning. You are differentiating a function f with respect to x. Okay, so but that's not the main point here. I just want to introduce this operator before we jump into curl and divergence. So now let's jump into a part where we are going to use this del operator. Now in engineering or physics or wherever it applies, there's something called the curl. Alright. The curl is actually, how can I say, the tendency of a particle to rotate. That is what is called a curl. For example, let's say you have a particle, I'm not sure, a smoke particle moving here and there in random motion, right? It's a smoke particle. So at one point, if you want to know what is the tendency of the particle to rotate, now the curl will tell you that value. Remember that for curl, you will get the final answer, not a value, but you will get the final answer as a vector. So if you are finding the curl, suddenly you get an answer 26, something is wrong. You won't get a value, you will get a vector. For example, let's say the vector 1, 5, negative 6. Just saying. So you know that the first component is x, the second component is y, the third component is z. So this is like saying that the tendency of the particle to rotate at the x-axis is 1. The tendency to rotate at the y-axis is a bit more, 5. The tendency to rotate at the z-axis is negative 6 in the opposite direction, things like that. So in any case, if you get the curl of something is 0, 0, 0, or in other words, the zero vector, it means that the particle is irrotational. It can't rotate. It is static like that, not rotating to the left, not rotating to the right. So that is what it means by curl, okay, the tendency to rotate. But of course, I'm not going to ask you to write an essay on what is curl, but it makes sense to know what you are studying right now. So how on earth did they arrive to the formula that curl is equal to del cross product with a vector function? Now the story is long. Okay, so there has been some experiment. People have been deriving mathematical function, put a bit of assumption in it to make it simple, this and that. There's a whole process of deriving this. But in this course, we don't care about deriving the value of a curl. We are only going to use the formula here. Okay, so no worries on that. This is the formula to find curl. Del operator, cross product, not normal multiplication. This is cross product with a vector function or a vector field. It's the same thing. On the other hand, later on, you will see that we have something called divergence. Divergence, this is the notation for it, div. So divergence is delta dot product with a vector function. Can you see curl was cross product, divergence was dot product. So if you still remember, maybe in engineering maths 1, maybe you learn vectors, not sure. But if you still remember, for when you're doing cross product, you will get the final answer as a vector. So that's why curl just now, it was vector. But for cross product, the final answer will be a number. It will be a value. So if suddenly you get 3i plus 7j, something is wrong. Divergence will give you one single value, 40, 78, and so on. So if curl was the tendency for a particle to rotate, divergence is the tendency of the particle to diverge away. Imagine you have a bunch of particles concentrated at one place. So the divergence is the tendency of the particle to diverge from that point, moving out. So you can say that the divergence tells you something about compressibility. Can you compress the particles together? Can they be expanded? So this is what we interpret by divergence. So in that sense, if you get divergence is equal to 0, just saying, if you get equal to 0, it means that the particle has no tendency to diverge away, meaning that it is incompressible. Incompressible, yes. You can't compress it, you can't expand it. It stays there. It doesn't diverge away. Okay, so that is the meaning of divergence. So whether you are investigating the divergence of a particle or the rotational movement of the particle, we will come across vectors. So in order to explain how to compute divergence and curl, I'm going to use one vector function here, or a vector field, and I am going to use this as an example to find both the curl and the divergence. Okay, so one example, one function, two different examples. So let us start with curl. Fix in your mind, curl is cross product. Cross product, the way you do it, I'm not sure how you do it before this, but the way that I have been doing cross product before this is this. If I have two different things being cross product together, I would find the determinant of the 3 times 3 matrix, where the first row, this is a standard way, the first row is I, J, K. The second row is your first thing here. What is it? It is del. So del, as we defined just now, was dou over dou x, dou over dou y, dou over dou z. So exactly that, I'm going to write that. Dou over dou x, dou over dou y, dou over dou z. The third row is the thing after the cross product here, vector function f. So what is your vector function just now? The first component was x square y. Okay, in case if this is a bit hard to follow because it's ijk, let me write the same thing in vector notation here. It's the same thing, just writing in a different notation. For me, this is easier to see. Alright, so the first component is x square y. The second component is xyz. And the third component is negative x square y square. So this determinant of this matrix here, that is the cross product between this and this. In other words, this is curl of f. Okay, a standard way of finding cross product. But of course, finding a cross product might be a bit messy. So how do you find the determinant of a 3 times 3 matrix? I hope you still remember. First, you will close this and this. So just look at the remaining 4 parts here. Okay, so when you do that, I would write I first because I is the intersection of the thing that I closed just now. Okay, I, and then the 4 things that we were considering just now after closing this and this, right? So that is dou over dou y multiply by this. It's like cross multiplication. So negative x square y square. Okay, minus cross product of this dou over dou z multiply with x, y, and z. Okay, that's the first part, I. So second, can I delete this? Okay. Second, you close this and this and look at the remaining 4 things. Again, it's like cross multiplication. So doing that, next is going to be minus j. Why on earth minus when there's no even negative here? It's a standard way of doing determinant of 3 by 3 matrix. The second component, j or whatever variable it is, the second component will always be minus. So plus, minus, and then plus. There will always be a negative. So now, putting in for j, cross product again, the 2 things, dou over dou x multiply by this, which is negative x square y square, minus cross product of dou over dou z multiply with this, x square y. So done for the second component. The third component, we are going to close this and this and look at the remaining 4 things. Again, cross multiplication. So if you do that, then back to positive is going to be, if I cross product this, is going to be dou over dou x multiply by xyz minus dou over dou y times x square y. So there you have it. It's a very long process, not the final answer, because the final answer you have to simplify. Don't leave it here. So I have to simplify the whole thing. To simplify, first you must understand what does it even mean by doing dou here. Of course, the first part, let me use a different marker. The first one in I, the meaning of dou over dou y of negative x square y square is that you partial differentiate this with respect to y currently. So what do I get if I differentiate this with respect to y? I'm going to get negative 2x square y. Okay, so differentiating with respect to y, x is a constant. And then differentiating this with respect to z, I'm going to get x, y. Okay, close. Next, plus j. The j part, again, differentiating this with respect to x, I'm going to get negative 2xy square. Differentiating this with respect to z, I would get, okay, there's no even z there, so it's just 0. And the third component, I have a plus k. Differentiating this with respect to x, I would get yz. Differentiating this with respect to y, I would get x square. Okay, it's minus j. Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Minus j. It should be minus, yes. Only for the j, it's minus. Anyway, so can I simplify this anymore? Nothing here, nothing here. Okay, the minus 0 can be simplified, but that's that. So my final answer that I get, I can write it as something I plus something j plus something k, but I prefer this notation here. So for the first component, negative x square y minus xy. The second component, okay, negative of negative become positive, so 2x y square. K is yz minus x square. So there you have it. This is my curl. Remember, the curl must be in a vector form. So luckily I did get a vector. If you get a value, something went wrong somewhere. So this is your curl. If I put in any coordinates for the x and y, let's say x is equal to 1, y is equal to 1, z is equal to 2. If I put in into here, I will get the exact vector that tells me what is the tendency of the particle to rotate? Okay. Anyways, here they did not ask you to find the curl at any specific point, so let's just leave it. This is your final answer. Okay. So please simplify, do not leave it in this green form here. Moving on, divergence. Divergence, on the other hand, is dot product. So let me see. The dot product of dot product of del, which is dou over dou x, dou over dou y, dou over dou z, dot product with f. Now f was a bit long just now, x square y, xyz, and negative x square y square. So this is just according to the question just now. Anyways, so this is the dot product of del and the function. So in other words, okay, let me just write here, this is the dot product. In other words, this is the divergence. Dot product is way easier than cross product. How do you find dot product? The first element or the first component multiplied by the first component plus second component multiplied by second component plus third component multiplied by third component. As easy as that. So the first component multiplied by the second component, the first component as well, sorry. The second component multiplied by the second component here. The third component here multiplied by the third component here. And of course, do not leave it in this form. You have to simplify. Okay, so again, what does it mean to differentiate this with respect to x? I would get 2x and then y. This one, if I differentiate with respect to y, I would get x and z. This one, if I differentiate with respect to z, there's no even z here, so it's just plus 0. So the plus 0 can be ignored actually. So this is your divergence. Can you see? The answer that we get is not in the form of a vector. There's only one component, there's only one value. So divergence, you will get one value. If you put in a particular coordinate of x and y and z, then you can imagine the whole thing simplifies into one single number. Okay, so the key takeaway here is that one single number for divergence, a vector for curl. So these are the formulas. I want you to try one question and that's all. One question and we call it a day. This is what I want you to find. I want you to find the divergence of curl F. Meaning that first find what is curl F. You will get a vector. Using that vector, find what is the divergence of that vector. Okay, so two steps. One example for you to recall back what is curl and divergence. Let me write the formula here. For curl, the formula is del cross product with F. For divergence, it's del dot product with F. Okay, try it on a piece of paper. I only want to know your final answer. Remember, they are not two different questions, it's one question. But in that one question, you need to find curl F first, then the divergence of whatever answer that you get. So the final value here, I want to know what is it. we have to solve the question by two methods. It's not really two methods, but it's more to, there are two steps involved in getting the final answer. The first one is the first step is finding the curl. Then once you get the answer, which is a vector, then you find the divergence of that vector. Can you show the working for the past question? Okay. I think divergence is a bit easy, so let me show you the curl. Because if I show everything at the same time, it will be a bit small. So maybe let me show you the curl first. So Ibrahim, if you are confused, just find curl f first, solve the curl part. Then you will see that you get a final answer as a vector. Okay, so just solve the curl of f. What is it? Wait, what is it? 0, oh, 0, 2z and y minus 2. 0. So this is what you got for your curl. 0 and then 2z y minus 2. I haven't do this yet, but I took the question from the internet as usual. Okay, this is what I got for the, not I, but this is what you should get for the curl. And this is what you would get for the divergence later on. So I see something is not right there. Just take note of this. I will send you the solution anyways. But the curl should be something like this. Keep on trying first. Then we'll get back to whatever it was just now. The divergence just now, it was 0, right? Yes. Divergence. Once you get a curl, which is a complicated vector there, but then you find the divergence, you should get 0. Okay, I can see a bunch of mixed answers here. Okay, let us just do this then. Meanwhile, if any of you are still trying, please continue. But let me see. First part is curl f, then only I find the divergence. Yes, it should be 0. Anyway, so the curl is, you have I, you have j, you have k, you have dou over dou x, dou over dou y, dou over dou z. The f, I have yz square, xy, and yz. So the determinant of this is the curl. So meaning that yz square, xy, and yz. So first you, what did you say? You block, right? You block the first column and then the second one. Yes, so this is for the curl, correct. So you do the curl first, so block this and this. What remains is I d dou over dou y of cross multiply yz minus cross multiply this xy. Okay, then minus j. Now you close this column and this row. So cross product the remaining thing. So dou over dou x and yz minus dou over dou z with yz square. And finally, for k back to positive, now we close this column and this row. So cross product the remaining. Dou over dou x of xy minus dou over dou y of yz square. It's a long process, but I believe it can be easily simplified here. Those who are getting 0, good, you are getting the answer. Anyway, so the whole thing here, differentiate this with respect to y, you only get z. Differentiate this with respect to z, you get nothing, 0, isn't it? Okay. Differentiate this with respect to x, you get 0. Differentiate this with respect to z, you will get 2zy or 2yz plus k. Differentiate this with respect to x, you will get y. Differentiate this with respect to y, you get z squared. Okay, so is it correct? You are getting a z, 2yz, and a y minus z squared. Okay, unless I did any careless mistake here, it should be correct. Z, 2yz, y minus z squared. Yep. So this is how you should find the curl. Once you find the curl, you dot product with the f, you dot product with the del, I believe you will get 0. Okay, so that one you can try it out. Just cross product dou over dou x, dou over dou y, dou over dou z. Cross dot product with the thing that you get up here. Hopefully you get 0. Now, one thing that I would like to emphasize at this point is that it is not a coincidence that you get 0 for the divergence of curl f. It is a property of vector that given any vector function f, if you find the divergence of the curl of f, you will get 0. Okay, no matter what the f is, it's not a coincidence. Divergence of curl f will always give you 0. Okay, it's a property that can be verified. So this is just an example to try that out. So hopefully the rest of you can get 0 as well. The curl part might be slightly tricky, but hopefully you can catch along once I give you the link for more practices. Anyways, 6-3 minute. Before I say we call it a day, any of you, do you have any questions? Because if there's no question, then I'm going to show you the attendance, fill it up, then you're free to go. Let me just wait for a few seconds in case anyone have any questions. Okay, apparently no questions. If suddenly you have question after this, feel free to send me in the chat box, okay? So as for now, let me show you the attendance. This tutorial. Okay. Four more remaining and 3. Alright, just for a few more seconds, I want to see who's that one guy. If that one guy is having internet problem, let me know after the class. Otherwise, scan it now. Okay, so I'm assuming that that guy is absent here. So that is all for today. Okay, so anything, just ask me after this. You can see the answer, I think, from the net. Okay, I will share you the link right now, immediately. So this is the link for the one from the internet website just now. So as for the others, we are done. So I'll meet you in our next class then. Okay, welcome.